My name is Audrey Collins. I am 33 years old, and on the night my entire family raised their glasses to celebrate my younger sister becoming the owner of my house, I was standing in the very kitchen I had paid for, beneath the brass light fixture I had restored by hand, listening to wood crackle in the fireplace my grandmother used to light every winter. My mother smiled, as though she had just presented the world with something beautiful. My father placed a hand on Madison's shoulder. The relatives applauded together, and Madison, wearing the red velvet dress I had bought her 2 weeks earlier, reached into her handbag, pulled out a gleaming new set of keys, held them beneath the Christmas tree lights, and said, "I knew you would understand. You always understand." I remember staring at those keys for a long time. It was not because I did not know what they opened. I recognized the long center tooth immediately, the small brass key to the wine cellar, the black access card for the East Gate, and even the pinewood star tag I had carved myself one evening in November. They were the spare keys I kept in my desk drawer beneath the plans for the north roof. They had disappeared 3 days earlier, on the same afternoon my father said he needed to use my study for a phone call because the living room was too noisy. But I said nothing then. I only stood with one hand resting on the back of a chair while my mother continued her speech. "Christmas is when families give one another what matters most," she said. "And this year, Richard and I want to give this house to Madison and Blake so they can have the beginning they deserve." She said, "Richard and I," as though both their names appeared on the deed. She said, "Give this house," as though 11 years of work, 13 rounds of negotiations with banks, and every dollar I had saved since I was 22 were merely the wrapping paper around their gift. I looked around the table. Aunt Caroline was wiping the corners of her eyes. Uncle Peter nodded approvingly. 2 relatives from Madison's future in-laws smiled with polished courtesy. Blake Whitmore sat beside my sister with one hand on the back of her chair, like a man who had just received exactly what he had been promised. His mother, Evelyn Whitmore, studied the exposed ceiling beams with the eyes of someone appraising an asset rather than admiring a home. Only one person did not applaud. Miriam Hale, attorney for the Preservation Trust, stood near the Christmas tree holding a mug of hot cider. I had invited her because she had been my grandmother's closest friend, and because, during the 6 months she helped me complete the restoration of the house, she had become nearly the only person I could call family without first having to persuade myself. Miriam looked at me, not with panic, not with pity. She simply watched, as though waiting to see what kind of woman I would become in the next 10 seconds. You may think I shouted. You may imagine that I snatched back the keys, called the police, or swept a glass of red wine across the cream tablecloth my mother had brought from home and insisted on using, even after I said it was unnecessary. But for most of my life, I was not the kind of person who reacted in front of an audience. I am an architect. I look at loads, cracks, and stress points. When a building makes the wrong sound, you do not swing a hammer at the first wall you see. You identify what is carrying weight it was never designed to bear. In my family, that had always been me. I grew up in this log house, though not in the way people assumed when they saw the old Christmas photographs displayed above the fireplace. I did not live here with my parents. I was sent here when I was 8, after a summer my mother called a difficult period, and my father called temporary. Temporary lasted almost 6 years. My grandmother Margaret lived alone at Pine Hollow, a 2-story log house buried deep in the pine-covered hills of northern Vermont. She was unlike any other woman in my family. She repaired her own roof, kept tax records in tin boxes labeled with purple ink, and never said, "Do not make a big thing out of it," when something was, in fact, a very big thing. She taught me how to use a spirit level before she taught me how to bake. She said real wood bends but does not pretend to be straight, and decent people are much the same. My parents lived 40 minutes away in a house that was larger, newer, and always so immaculate that nothing inside it looked as though it had ever been loved. Madison lived with them. She had a pink bedroom, ballet lessons, themed birthday parties, and a little battery-powered car when she was 6. I had an attic room at Pine Hollow, an old wool blanket, and a grandmother who never allowed me to believe I had been left behind. My mother said I loved nature. My father said the school in my grandmother's town was better. When I was little, I believed both of them. When I grew older, I understood that they had sent away the adaptable child so they could concentrate on the child who needed more care. Madison had asthma, cried often, and learned very young how to turn her needs into the weather of a room. I, according to my mother, could always take care of myself. That was the first compliment that became a sentence in my life. I could take care of myself, so no one needed to attend my 7th grade science presentation. I could take care of myself, so when Grandma needed hip surgery, I could miss a week of school to stay home and help her. I could take care of myself, so Madison needed tuition for art school more than I needed to attend the architecture program that had accepted me. I earned scholarships, worked nights, and listened to my father tell relatives that he had raised 2 successful daughters. Grandma was the only person who never allowed them to tell that story without correcting it. She always said, "Audrey built her own bridge. Do not stand on the bank and take credit." Pine Hollow was not a magnificent house. When I was a child, winter wind slipped through the west windows. The porch sagged. A long crack ran through the stone chimney like a scar. But Grandma knew every sound it made. The 5th stair at night. The metal roof contracting when the temperature dropped below 10 degrees. The kitchen door brushing its frame when snow piled too high on the back porch. Houses speak too, she told me. The trouble is that people only listen when they are about to collapse. I probably became an architect because of that sentence. I wanted to understand how something remained standing. I wanted to know why one room could make a person feel safe while another made everyone lower their voices without thinking. I studied loads, materials, light, and the invisible paths a body chooses before the mind catches up. I learned how to restore old structures without erasing their history. I never learned how to do that with my family. Grandma died 3 years ago, in early January, while the Christmas tree still stood in the living room, and the dried orange slices she had hung around the windows had not yet lost their color. In her will, she left Pine Hollow to a local preservation trust, on the condition that I receive the right to purchase it and continue protecting its original architecture. It was her way of shielding the house from my father, though I did not fully understand that at the time. My father was furious. "Houses are family property," he said during the reading of the will. She had no right to lock us out with paperwork. Miriam Hale, already in her 60s then, sat across from him and said, "Actually, paperwork is precisely what determines who has rights." It took me 2 years to gather enough money. I sold my small condominium in Boston, liquidated long-term investments, and accepted 3 additional hotel restoration projects until there were months when I slept on airplanes more often than I slept in a bed. I did not ask my parents for $1. I did not tell them each time a bank rejected me or each time repair costs rose. When I completed the purchase, I did not put the house in my personal name. Following instructions Grandma had left in a letter, I established the Pine Hollow Preservation Trust. I was its founder, principal trustee, and beneficiary of the right of residence, but the house belonged to the trust. Any transfer required my signature, Miriam's signature, as independent co-trustee, and approval from the Preservation Board. My father knew I had bought the house back. He did not know the legal structure, or at least, I believed he did not. That autumn, after the restoration was nearly complete, I decided to invite the entire family for Christmas. I defended that decision to myself with words like healing, closure, and a new beginning. The truth was simpler. I wanted them to see what I had accomplished and say they were proud of me. At 33, with my own design firm and a newly completed restoration featured on the cover of an architecture magazine, I still wanted my mother to walk into that house and look at me as though I were more than the child who could always manage alone. She accepted so quickly that it surprised me. "The whole family will stay there?" she asked. 4 days, from the 22nd through the 26th. "How many bedrooms?" 5, if you count the attic room. "Is the east bedroom large?" I laughed. "You have not even arrived and you are already choosing a room?" She laughed too, but did not answer. Then she asked how many cars the garage could hold, whether the new heating system could be controlled remotely, how far the property extended, and whether the guest house behind the main house could be converted into an office. I thought she was interested. I mistook an inspection for love. Madison was even more enthusiastic. She sent me dozens of Christmas decorating ideas and suggested replacing every ornament I had chosen with a white and gold palette because red and green looked cheap. She asked whether Blake and his parents could join us for Christmas Eve dinner. I hesitated, then agreed. Blake had proposed in November. The two families had not yet met formally. I told myself it might be a good beginning. During the weeks of preparation, there were many signs I ignored. My mother asked for a copy of the floor plan to arrange everyone's rooms. My father wanted to know whether my office had a fireproof safe because old houses are risky. Madison posted a photograph of Pine Hollow on social media with the caption, "Cannot wait for our first Christmas in our future home." When I questioned her, she changed it to "our dream future home" and told me I was too sensitive about wording. 3 days before Christmas, I found my father in my study. He was standing beside my desk with one drawer open. The moment he saw me, he lifted his phone. "The living room is too noisy," he said. "I needed to call the bank." I looked at the drawer. "What bank is open at 7 in the evening?" He shrugged. "The automated line." I did not press him. After he left, I closed the drawer and noticed that the trust documents had been disturbed. The spare keys still seemed to be there, or I thought they were, because the wooden star lay on top. Only the following evening did I realize he had left the tag and taken every actual key. Even then, I did not think he planned to take the house. I assumed he wanted copies so he could return without asking. In my family, violation always arrived disguised as convenience. On December 24th, snow began falling before sunrise. Pine Hollow looked so much like a Christmas card that it seemed almost artificial. Warm lights traced the porch roof. A wreath of white pine hung on the door. The Christmas tree nearly touched the beams, topped with the tin star Grandma had used for more than 40 years. I made French onion soup, roasted a turkey, baked apple pie from her recipe, and placed handwritten name cards at every setting. My mother walked in at 4 that afternoon, looked around and said, "You kept too many old things." That was her first sentence. My father inspected the windows, thermostat, and cellar lock. Madison went directly upstairs, with Blake following her. 10 minutes later, I heard her call down, "The east room would be perfect for a nursery." I stood in the kitchen with a pie knife in my hand, while a small, cold feeling traveled down my spine. "For whose children?" I asked when she came back downstairs. Madison smiled. "Future children. Do not be so tense." Blake looked away. Dinner began at 7. For the first hour, everything was almost normal. My father told old stories. Aunt Caroline praised the food. Blake's mother asked me about the restoration. I explained the stone foundation system, the beams we had preserved, and the way we concealed new wiring behind old paneling. She listened with genuine interest, while Madison repeatedly interrupted to say she had helped choose the curtain colors, which was not true. After dessert, my mother stood. She tapped a spoon against her glass. The room gradually quieted. Candlelight moved across everyone's faces. Outside the windows, snow gathered heavily on the pine branches. "Christmas is when families think about the future," my mother said. "This year, we have so much to be grateful for. Madison and Blake are about to begin their life together, and Richard and I want to give them a solid foundation." I saw my father reach into the pocket of the coat hanging behind his chair. "This house," my mother continued, "will be the Collins family's wedding gift to them." For 1 second, no one looked at me. Everyone looked at Madison. Then the applause erupted. Madison stood with shining eyes and embraced my mother. My father handed her a cream envelope. She opened it and withdrew the keys and a set of notarized papers. I heard Evelyn Whitmore say, "How generous." Blake bent to kiss Madison. Aunt Caroline cried. At last, my mother looked at me, her smile slightly strained, as though I were 1 beat late in a performance everyone else had rehearsed. "Aren't you going to congratulate your sister?" she asked. I pushed back my chair and stood. "I only want to understand one thing," I said. "What exactly are you giving her?" Her smile did not move. "Audrey, do not make this uncomfortable. It is a simple question. What are you giving her?" My father pushed the envelope toward me. "The paperwork is complete. You signed the transfer last week." I opened the envelope. Inside was an agreement transferring ownership of Pine Hollow from Audrey Collins to Richard and Diane Collins, followed by a deed gifting it to Madison Collins and Blake Whitmore upon their marriage. At the bottom was a signature bearing my name. It was close, very close. My father had watched my signature often enough on cards, contracts, and minor authorization forms, but he did not know that when I signed my name, I always pulled the final stroke of the Y upward because Grandma had taught me to write it that way. The forged signature sat straight, clean, and obedient on the line, just like the daughter my parents wanted me to be. "I never signed this," I said. My father sighed as though I were ruining a thoughtful surprise. "Do not start with technicalities. You said the house belonged to the family." "I never said that. You bought back Grandma's house. It was already family property." "No, I purchased the house from the Preservation Trust with my own money." Madison gave a small laugh, sharp as a fingernail tapping glass. "You are acting as though I am stealing the only place you have to live. You have an apartment in Boston, an office in New York, and you travel constantly. You do not even need a 5-bedroom house. So you take it?" "No one is taking anything. Mom and Dad gave it to me. Something they do not own." My mother set down her glass harder than necessary. "Enough. It is Christmas Eve." "Yes," I said. "And you just gave my house to someone else in front of my Christmas tree." Evelyn Whitmore looked from me to my parents. "Richard, you told us ownership had been verified." My father stood, his face reddening. "It has been verified. Audrey is reacting emotionally. She has always had trouble sharing." I looked at Miriam. She set down her mug. "Mr. Collins," she said, "would you care to explain exactly who notarized this document?" My father froze. Miriam walked over, took the paper from my hand, examined the seal, and said, "Because the person named here lost his notary commission 2 years ago." The room went silent. My mother turned toward my father. Madison tightened her grip on the keys. Blake sat straighter. For the first time in my life, I did not feel as though I were standing in the middle of my family. I felt as though I were inside a structure whose principal fracture had finally become visible, and at last, I could hear it preparing to fall. My father looked at Miriam with the hatred he reserved for anyone who placed truth in the center of a room he wanted to control. "You do not understand our family," he said. "No," Miriam replied. "I understand legal records, and I understand that this house cannot be transferred through a forged signature on an invalid instrument." Madison was still holding the keys. "What do you mean, forged?" I turned to her. There was real confusion in her eyes, or at least part of it was real. "You did not know? Dad said you agreed." My father cut in immediately. "She agreed in principle. She simply likes making everything complicated." "I never agreed in principle, verbally, or in any other form. You said you wanted the house to remain in the family. Remaining in the family does not mean giving it to Madison." My mother looked at me with the expression that had made me feel 8 years old for most of my life. "You know your sister and Blake need somewhere to begin. You have more than you need. What is wrong with sharing?" I almost laughed. Not because the question was funny, but because it was perfect. My family always began with someone else's need and ended by turning my ownership into a moral defect. "What is wrong," I said, "is that you plan to use my property without asking me, took keys from my desk, forged my signature, and invited Madison's future in-laws here so you could make it a fait accompli." Evelyn Whitmore rose. Her face remained composed, but her voice had gone cold. "Madison, you told us this house belonged to your parents." Madison looked at my mother. "Mom said it did." My mother answered at once. "In a family sense, it does." "In a family sense?" Evelyn repeated. "My son cannot build his future on, in a family sense." Blake touched his mother's hand. "Mom, we can settle this later." "No," she said. "You included this property in the financial package for the loan to buy your company." That was the first moment Madison truly went pale. I looked at Blake. "You used my house to demonstrate your financial capacity?" He stood slowly. "Not directly. We only included it in the projected post-marital assets." "Based on whose word?" "Your father's." My father raised a hand. "Enough. This is not the place to discuss bank documents." "Why not?" Miriam asked. "You just turned Audrey's dining room into the site of a real estate announcement." Aunt Caroline began whispering to her husband. 2 other relatives avoided my eyes. I realized most of them had known about the gift. Perhaps not about the forged signature, but enough to buy nice clothes, drive through the snow, and sit around my table waiting to see where I would be placed. I took my phone from my pocket. My father watched the movement. "What are you doing?" "Turning down the heating in the guest wing and disabling every access card without administrative authorization." My mother stared at me. "You cannot throw everyone outside in a snowstorm." "The storm stopped at 6. The roads have been cleared." "There are children here." There were no children. Aunt Caroline called every niece and nephew a child, even though the youngest was 21. I opened the home control application and changed the living and dining rooms to energy-saving mode. The heat would not shut off completely. The temperature would fall from 72 degrees to 61 over the next hour. No one would be endangered, but everyone would understand that this was not their hotel. Madison stepped closer. "You are humiliating me in front of Blake's family." I looked at her. "You just accepted my house in front of them. I did not know Dad forged your signature, but you knew I had never told you I was giving you the house." She said nothing. That was an answer. Miriam placed the document on the table. "I need to see the entire file Mr. Collins used." My father folded his arms. "There is nothing else. You just called this completed paperwork. To produce it, you needed the property's legal description, ownership information, and supporting documents. Where did you obtain them?" "Richard," my mother said softly. He looked at her, then at me. "I only took copies from Audrey's office." "When?" I asked. "Last month." "You entered the house while I was away?" He did not answer. I remembered an afternoon in mid-November when the security system reported that the east door had opened, but the camera failed to save footage because of a connection loss. My father said the wind had probably confused the sensor. I had believed him because he had helped install that lock. "You already had a key," I said. "Your grandmother gave it to me." Miriam shook her head. "Margaret changed the locks after you tried to sell the South Cottage without telling her." The air in the room shifted. I turned toward her. "What?" Miriam looked at my father, then at me. "I think it is time to read the letter." My father said immediately, "No." Only one word, but far too quickly. Miriam had brought a brown leather bag. She opened it and removed a thick envelope with my name written in purple ink. I recognized Grandma's handwriting at once, tall letters leaning slightly forward, as if they were always going somewhere. Margaret instructed me to read this only if anyone in the family attempted to transfer Pine Hollow without Audrey's consent, Miriam said. I had hoped the condition would never arise. "She is dead," my father said. "She does not get to keep dividing this family from the grave." Miriam looked at him. "You did enough of that while she was alive." My mother lowered herself into a chair. Her face had gone white. Madison stood beside Blake, but they were no longer touching. Miriam opened the letter. "Dear Audrey," she read, "if you are hearing these words, it means someone has tried to take Pine Hollow by making you feel selfish for wanting to keep it. I am sorry I guessed correctly." I did not realize I had been holding my breath until it left my chest. This house was never a prize for the most obedient person, nor communal property simply because many people once ate dinner here. It was a refuge, first for me, then for you. I placed it in the trust because I knew paperwork was the only language your father respected when he could not alter it. My father struck the table with his palm. "This is slander." Miriam did not stop. "When Audrey was 8, Richard asked me to sell Pine Hollow to pay a debt he called a family expense. I refused. 1 month later, Audrey was sent to live with me. They said she liked it here. Perhaps that was true. Another truth is that the house became the price I paid to keep her safe." I looked at my mother. She lowered her face. Every childhood memory shifted slightly. The times my father had spoken privately with Grandma in the kitchen, the arguments compressed behind closed doors. The sentence she once gave me when I asked why I could not go home and live with Madison. "One day you will understand that staying where you are safe is not the same as being abandoned." Miriam continued reading. "Richard once used my signature on a mortgage application against this house without my consent. I discovered it before the bank released the funds. He called it a misunderstanding, a formality, the sort of thing family members do for one another. I called it by its proper name. That is why Pine Hollow belongs only to the first granddaughter willing to protect it from her own family." The final sentence fell through the room like a blade. Miriam lowered the letter. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Madison laughed, though there was no joy in it. "So Grandma always intended to give Audrey everything?" "No," I said. "She gave me the right to buy the house. I paid for it. At a favored price. At a price determined by 3 independent appraisers because the house must preserve its original architecture and cannot be commercially developed. You always find a way to make yourself the most deserving person in the room." "Madison," Blake said quietly. She turned on him. "Do not tell me to calm down. Audrey was always Grandma's special one. She has the house, the career, the magazine articles, everything. I only wanted something to begin beautifully for once." I looked at my sister and saw something that hurt more than greed. She truly believed my house was a reasonable part of her dream. She did not see herself taking anything. She saw me withholding something that should have been used to make her life easier. "You can have a beautiful beginning," I said, "but not by moving into my house without asking me." My mother stood. Audrey, you are punishing your sister for your father's mistake. I am asking her to return the keys. Madison tightened her fist around them. No. It was a very small word, but everyone turned toward her. I already changed my mailing address, she said, her voice trembling. Blake paid a deposit to an interior designer. We told his family. I cannot go back now and say the whole thing was a misunderstanding. So you would rather keep my house? You do not understand what I will lose. I could hardly believe her. You are standing inside what I would lose. Evelyn Whitmore picked up her handbag. Blake, we are leaving. Madison spun toward her. You cannot just walk out. I will not participate in a transaction based on forgery. This is not my fault. Perhaps it was not at first, Evelyn said. But Audrey has made herself clear, and you are still holding the keys. Blake stood between them, his face tightening. Finally, he turned to Madison. Give them back. She stared at him, as though he had betrayed her. You too? It is not your house. She threw the keys onto the table. One bounced over the edge, struck the wooden floor, and slid to my feet. I bent to pick it up. When I straightened, I addressed the room. You have 30 minutes to pack. The southern road has been plowed. The inn in town still has rooms. Miriam will remain here. My mother looked at me as though I had announced I was no longer her daughter. You are throwing your parents out on Christmas Eve. I am asking the people who just tried to take my house to leave my house. You will regret this. Maybe, but tonight I still want you gone. The room broke into confused motion. Chairs scraped, coats came down, and whispers rose. Aunt Caroline cried that she wanted no part in any of this, despite having applauded minutes earlier. Uncle Peter asked whether he could remain until morning because he had been drinking, and I called him a car. Two younger relatives quietly apologized before leaving. Evelyn Whitmore summoned a driver to take her family back to their hotel. Blake followed his mother, but before he reached the door, he looked back at Madison. You knew Audrey had never agreed, didn't you? Madison did not answer. He nodded once, as though that was enough, then walked out. Madison stood in the living room holding her coat, mascara beginning to run. Are you satisfied? No. You just destroyed my engagement. Dad forged documents. You tried to keep a house that was not yours. Do not place all of it on me simply because I was the last person to say no. She stepped closer. You have always hated me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I have spent my entire life trying not to hate you. My mother moved between us. Enough, both of you. I looked at her. No, Mom. This is what you always do. You turn everything into a fight between two sisters, so Dad never has to accept responsibility, and you never have to choose the truth. Her face tightened. You have no idea what I have done to keep this family together. Then tell me. She looked toward my father. He stood near the study door, with a leather briefcase held against his chest. I recognized it as the case he had brought into the house 2 days earlier, and had not let out of his sight since Miriam began reading. What is in the case? I asked. My father tightened his grip on the handle. Personal records. Related to the house? Miriam asked. No. Then you will not mind if I look. You have no right. I stepped forward. You took my records. You forged my signature. If you carry any document connected to Pine Hollow out of this house, I will call the police right now. My father stared at me for a long time. The anger of a humiliated parent was gone from his eyes. Something else had replaced it. Fear. At last, he set the case on the table. Miriam opened the locks. Inside were copies of trust records, property descriptions, the forged instruments, correspondence with a former notary, and a faded blue file. When Miriam lifted the folder, a thin sheet slipped from the bottom of the case, turned once in the air, and fell beside the Christmas tree. Madison was closest. She bent to retrieve it. I saw the heading before she could hide the page. Certificate of Live Birth, St. Anne's Hospital. December 28th, 29 years earlier. Child's name, Madison Teresa Alvarez. Mother's name, Teresa Elena Alvarez. Father's name, Richard James Collins. Madison read those lines twice. Her entire face seemed to lose its structure. "My mother is Diane Collins," she said. No one answered. She looked up at my mother. "My mother is Diane Collins." My mother stepped backward and caught the back of a chair. My father said, "Madison, this is not the time." "Then, when?" She held up the certificate. "After I moved into Audrey's house? After the wedding? After everyone pretended for another 30 years? My mother closed her eyes, and in that moment, amid the scent of pine, candle wax, and dinner still warm on the table, I understood that the house was only the first secret opened that night. I did not know who Teresa Alvarez was, or rather, I knew only a blurred version. A young woman who had worked for Grandma during the summer when I was 4. I remembered long black hair, Spanish songs while she washed dishes, and hands that always smelled of lemon soap. Then she disappeared. My mother said Teresa had returned to Puerto Rico to care for family. Grandma never mentioned her again. Madison looked at my father. Who was she? He stood still. Was she my mother? My mother spoke first. "I am your mother." Madison turned toward her. "Not on this paper. A piece of paper did not raise you. But a piece of paper says, 'All of you lied.'" My mother began to cry. "We protected you." "From what?" No one answered. Miriam gathered the remaining documents from the case. She examined the birth certificate, then looked at my father with an expression I had never seen on her face. It was not surprise. It was recognition. "Margaret knew," she said. My father snapped toward her. "You will say nothing else." She knew Teresa did not leave willingly. The room froze. I heard wind sweep across the porch roof. The heating system changed modes with a soft sound inside the walls. Madison approached Miriam. "You knew my biological mother?" "Not as well as I wish I had." "Is she alive?" Miriam looked at me first, then at Madison. "According to what Margaret found before she died, yes." Madison released a broken breath. My mother collapsed into a chair. My father lunged for the folder, but I stepped between them. "Do not," I said. He looked at me, and for the first time I did not move back. "You have no idea how complicated this is," he said. "Then explain it." "Not here." I looked around the house. "You chose this place to announce that the house belonged to Madison. It is good enough for the truth." His jaw tightened. "Teresa worked for your grandmother. She and I had a brief relationship. Your mother knew." When Teresa became pregnant, everything was handled. "Handled?" Madison repeated. My father looked at her. "She could not provide for a child. We could." "Did she give me away?" He hesitated too long. Miriam said, "There is a consent to adoption." "Was that signature forged too?" I asked. My father turned on me with an expression that looked almost like a slap. "Do not make everything the same issue. You forged my signature. It is a reasonable question." Miriam opened the faded blue folder. Inside were copies of a guardianship agreement, hospital discharge papers, and a handwritten letter in Spanish. She turned to the final page. "Teresa's signature on the guardianship agreement does not match her signature on the discharge record," she said. "Margaret suspected that years ago." Madison looked at my father. "Did you take me from my mother? I gave you a life. Did you take me from my mother?" My father slammed his palm against the table. "She took money and left." My mother shot to her feet. "Richard, be quiet." Madison turned toward her. "You knew." Through tears, my mother said, "I knew you were not biologically mine. I did not know how every document had been prepared. But I raised you as my own child. Yes, and sent Audrey away. That question silenced all of us. My mother looked at me, then at Madison. That is unrelated. It may be related to everything, I said. She shook her head. Audrey liked living with Grandma. I was 8. You were strong. Madison needed me more. Madison looked at me. For the first time that night, there was no challenge in her eyes, only a slow horror as she realized that the love she had received might have been built upon another child's removal. My father closed the briefcase. This ends here. No, Madison said. He looked at her. She placed the birth certificate on the table and removed her engagement ring, though she did not set it down. I want to know where Teresa is. No, I am not asking permission. There was something in her voice that sounded like my own voice from minutes earlier. My father moved toward the door. Diane, we are leaving. My mother looked between us, panicked like someone standing on opposite banks of a river she had spent her life pretending did not exist. Finally, she took her coat and followed him. Madison did not move. My father stopped in the doorway. You are coming with us. No, Madison. You lied to me about my biological mother. You tried to give me a stolen house. I am not getting into a car with you. My father turned toward me. Do you see? This is what you wanted. To tear the family into pieces. I opened the door. No, I said. I only turned on the lights. He stepped outside. My mother followed, but before leaving, she looked at Madison and said, I love you. Madison did not answer. When my parents' car disappeared beyond the pines, the house fell silent. It was not the peace I remembered. It was the silence after an explosion, when dust still hangs in the air and no one knows which section of the roof will collapse next. Miriam closed the door, raised the living room temperature, and said, You both need to sit down. Madison stood in the middle of the room, still wearing her coat, the birth certificate in her hand. I want to find Teresa. Miriam looked at me. I knew what that look asked. Did I want to become involved? After everything Madison had just done, did I want to open this door with her? The bitter part of me wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her to manage on her own. She had received 30 years of parents, birthday parties, vacations, attention, and protection. She had just tried to take the only place that belonged to my memories. Why should I help her find another mother? Then I looked at the birth certificate. A child does not choose how she enters a family. 29 years earlier, a woman may have lost her baby through the same kind of paperwork my father had just used to take my house. I pulled out a chair. Sit down, I said. We start with the records. We worked until nearly 3 in the morning. Miriam spread the files across the dining table, where the glasses from dinner still had not been cleared. Madison sat opposite me with both hands around a cup of cold tea, occasionally looking at the Christmas tree as though the room had betrayed her by remaining beautiful after everything that had happened. The blue file was incomplete. It contained a copy of the birth certificate, a temporary guardianship consent, hospital discharge papers, correspondence between my father and a deceased attorney, several money transfer receipts, and 3 letters Teresa had sent Grandma. 2 were in Spanish. The third was written in hesitant English. Miriam read slowly. Mrs. Margaret, they say I agreed for the family to keep Madison for 1 year. I did not agree forever. Mr. Richard says if I return, he will report that I stole money. I took no money. I only want to see my daughter. Madison closed her eyes. The letter was dated February 29 years earlier, less than 2 months after her birth. Another letter carried a return address in Hartford. Teresa wrote that she had found work in a hotel, rented a small room, and wanted to take Madison home. Grandma had written a note in purple ink along the margin. Richard says the adoption is complete, will not show me the papers. The final letter had been sent 17 years earlier. Teresa wrote that she had married, moved to New Mexico, and still wanted to know whether her daughter was well. She did not ask to reclaim custody. She only asked for a photograph. There was no evidence that Grandma had replied. Grandma knew her address, Madison said. Possibly, I answered. Then why did she not find me? You were 14 then, Miriam said, and Margaret was raising Audrey. She feared that if she confronted Richard directly, he would cut off all contact and move the entire family away. Madison looked at me. Did you know anything? No. She never told you? Never. Madison lowered her eyes. Of course. She protected you from the secret. I lived inside it. I wanted to argue that I had not been protected either. I had been sent away, trained to believe I was too independent to need parents, turned into the person who always had to understand. But looking at Madison then, I realized pain did not need to form a line before it could be acknowledged. She had just learned that the woman who held her all her life had not given birth to her, that the father who always defended her may have taken her from her biological mother, and that the name she had used for 30 years was not the first name written for her. I can find her current address, Miriam said. But it will take time. No, I said, studying an old transfer receipt. There may be a faster way. My father had sent money to Teresa through a bank in Santa Fe for 7 years. The transfers stopped in the same year Grandma died. If the account still existed, an attorney or legal notice might trace the recipient. But there was another detail. In the last letter, Teresa mentioned a flower shop called Luz de Invierno that her husband had opened. I searched online. The store still existed. Its website showed a photograph of the owner standing beneath a trellis of bougainvillea. The woman appeared to be in her late 50s, with black hair threaded in silver, a narrow face, and brown eyes identical to Madison's when she was not wearing makeup. Madison covered her mouth with one hand. The name beneath the photograph read, Teresa Alvarez Morales. The shop was closed for Christmas, but its contact page listed a personal number for urgent orders. Madison picked up her phone, then put it down. She lifted it again. I do not know what to say. You do not have to call at 3 a.m, I said. It is only 1 in New Mexico. It is still Christmas. My entire life is a delayed phone call. She dialed. No one answered. A soft, slightly husky woman's voice played on voicemail. Madison left no message. She only listened until the connection ended on its own. We slept very little. Miriam took the living room. Madison chose the sofa in the library instead of the east bedroom she had called her future nursery only hours earlier. I went up to my old attic room, part of which I had deliberately preserved during the restoration. The beam still held the mark where I recorded my height at 10. In the desk was Grandma's tin box, filled with pencils, measuring tape, and unsent cards. I found an envelope bearing Diane's name. It had no stamp and no date. Inside was a letter Grandma had written to my mother but apparently never delivered. Diane, you are trying to love Madison enough to prove that you have forgiven Richard. But every time you protect that child from consequences, Audrey pays the price. You cannot heal your husband's betrayal by turning one child into proof of your generosity and the other into a container for your anger. I sat on the floor for a long time holding the letter. That sentence explained more than I wanted to know. My mother had not indulged Madison merely because she was more fragile. Madison was the project through which she tried to save her marriage. If she could love her husband's child with another woman, she would be the noble wife, the family would remain intact, and betrayal could be rewritten as a beautiful story. I, the biological child of the marriage before it broke, became an unwanted witness. I had my father's eyes and my mother's chin. I carried evidence that another family had existed before they rebuilt it around Madison. My mother did not hate me. Perhaps that hurt more. She merely believed I was strong enough to absorb the necessary damage. On Christmas morning, I went downstairs at 7. Madison was already awake, still wearing the previous night's sweater, sitting by the window with her phone in her hand. "She called back," she said. I stopped. At 6, I did not answer in time. She left a message. "Have you listened?" Madison shook her head. "I want you to hear it with me." We sat at the kitchen table. She turned on the speaker. Teresa's voice came through, cautious and faintly trembling. "Hello. I saw a call from Vermont. If this is about the flower shop, we are closed until the 27th. If this is Madison, you do not have to say anything yet. I have waited a very long time. I can wait a little longer until you are ready." That was the entire message. Madison began crying without making a sound. I sat beside her. A minute later, she rested her forehead on my shoulder, as she had when we were children, before we learned to turn everything into a competition. I remembered a night when Madison was 7 and I was 11, and our parents were arguing downstairs. She climbed into my bed and asked whether they were getting divorced. I told her no, though I did not know. I held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, my mother drove me back to Pine Hollow earlier than planned because Madison needs a quiet house. I had forgotten that memory, or tried to. "I am sorry about the house," Madison said against my shoulder. I did not answer at once. "I knew you had never agreed," she continued. "Dad said you would object at first and eventually give in. Mom said that if they made it a surprise in front of everyone, you would not have the heart to ruin it. I knew that was wrong. I had already told Blake. His family believed I was bringing the house into the marriage. Once it went that far, I began to need you to agree so I would not have to admit I had lied." The old anger returned, but it no longer burned blindly. "You did not merely lie. You chose to trap me. I know. Did you take the keys? Dad did." I made another copy. "Why?" She looked down. "I brought the interior designer here last week while you were in Boston." I closed my eyes. That explained the chair that had been moved in the east bedroom and the fingerprints on the edge of the curtain I had just hung. "You entered my house while I was away." "Yes. That is not something a Christmas morning apology repairs." "I know. I have not forgiven you." Madison nodded, tears still moving down her face. "I am not asking you to forgive me yet." It was the first sentence she had ever spoken that did not require me to make her feelings easier. My phone vibrated. A message from my mother read, "Your father is having chest pain. We are at the hospital. If you still care about this family, come now." I read it aloud to Madison. She sprang to her feet. "We have to go." Miriam appeared in the doorway, already wearing her coat. "I will call the hospital first." 10 minutes later, she returned. "Richard has not been admitted. There is no emergency record under his name this morning." Madison slowly sat back down. I looked at the message. I was not surprised, only tired. I called my mother. She answered before the first ring finished. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He is unwell." "Which hospital?" Silence. "I checked," I said. "No one has been admitted." Her voice hardened. "He had chest pain at the hotel. We are considering going to the hospital." "Then tell the truth. I need both of you to come here. We have to talk before everything gets out of control." What is getting out of control? The forged documents or Madison learning about Teresa? She drew in a sharp breath. Miriam had no right to dig into that. Miriam did not drop the birth certificate out of Dad's briefcase. I raised Madison. I am her mother. No one denies that. But you do not have the right to erase the woman who gave birth to her. You do not understand what kind of person Teresa was. Good. Then tell me. She remained silent long enough for me to hear the hotel heater on her end. She wanted money, my mother said. Dad said she accepted money. Her letters say she wanted to see her child. She would destroy the family. The family was damaged when all of you decided the truth was more dangerous than the lie. My mother began crying. Audrey, I know you are angry, but you do not know what it was like to raise the child of the woman your husband betrayed you with. Every day I looked at her, I had to choose to love her. I did that. I looked at Madison. She heard every word. Do you hear yourself? I asked. You are describing the act of loving a child as a sacrifice for which that child should be grateful. That is not what I mean. Then what about me? What did you choose every day when you looked at me? The other end went silent. I continued, though my throat hurt. Grandma wrote that you used Madison to prove you had forgiven Dad and used me to hold the anger that remained. Was she right? She was always against me. No, she saw what you refused to see. You always chose her because she chose me. The sentence escaped before I could stop it. It was not loud, but it silenced both of us. At last, my mother said very quietly, I thought you did not need me as much as Madison did. A child should not have to prove she needs her mother in order to be kept. I ended the call. Madison looked at me. I did not know. Neither did I. I thought you left because you did not like us. I was sent away. She nodded, pain crossing her face. Every story in our family is told so that the person abandoned looks like the person who chose to leave. It was the wisest thing I had ever heard Madison say. By noon, Blake called. Madison placed him on speaker. His voice sounded exhausted. My mother withdrew the loan application, he said. She wants to postpone the wedding. Madison closed her eyes. And you? I want to know what else you have hidden. I did not know about Teresa, but you knew the house was not yours. I believed Audrey would surrender it. That is not a better answer. Madison looked at me, then said, No, I knew she had not agreed. I let it continue because I wanted the house and because I was afraid your family would think I brought nothing into the marriage. Blake was silent. I am sorry, she said, but I am not asking you to make a decision today. I need time. I understand. The call ended. Madison set down the phone without throwing it, blaming me or chasing after him. She simply sat and accepted the consequences of what she had done. I felt no satisfaction, only an empty space where the old machinery had always turned. Madison caused a problem, Mom repaired it, Dad paid for it, and I understood. On Christmas afternoon, Teresa called again. This time Madison answered. She did not say Mom. She said, I am Madison Collins. I think my first name was Madison Alvarez. A sob escaped from the other end. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Teresa did not tell everything. She asked whether Madison was healthy, whether she was happy, whether she liked music. Madison asked why Teresa had left. Teresa said she had not left voluntarily. After the birth, my father told her Madison had breathing problems and needed medical care she could not afford. He offered to let the family care for the baby temporarily. When Teresa recovered and tried to take her daughter home, he accused her of stealing my mother's emerald bracelet. No formal charges were filed, but he threatened to call the police and have her immigration status revoked. He gave me $3,000 and a bus ticket, Teresa said over the speaker. I did not take the money. He put it in my bag. Later, a lawyer said I had signed adoption papers. I do not remember signing. I was medicated after childbirth. I was very weak. Miriam wrote down every detail. Teresa said Grandma found her years later and sent photographs of Madison. They exchanged letters for a time, but when my father discovered it, the letters stopped. Teresa did not know Grandma had died. She interpreted the silence as the family's refusal to continue contact. "Do you want to meet me?" Madison asked. "I have wanted that since the day they carried you out of my hospital room," Teresa replied. "But I do not want to take another choice away from you," Madison cried. Teresa cried too. I stood by the window watching snow begin to fall again and thought about a woman who had spent nearly 30 years refusing to do what my father had done in one night. She did not decide for someone else and call it love. At the end of the call, Teresa said something that made Miriam look up. "I still have the original letter Richard sent," she said. "He wrote that if I agreed not to return to Vermont, he would make sure Madison inherited Pine Hollow after Margaret died." I turned around. "He promised the house?" I asked. "Yes," Teresa said. I did not believe he had the authority, but he said it was how he would guarantee her future. Everything aligned in a cold and terrible way. My father had not invented the idea of giving Pine Hollow to Madison in the last few months. He had carried that promise for almost 30 years. When Grandma placed the house into a trust and gave me the right to purchase it, he did not merely see an asset slipping away. He saw an old lie approaching exposure. Madison's engagement to Blake, whose family valued property and status, gave him a chance to fulfill the promise, seal the past, and transform theft into a beautiful Christmas gift. I asked Teresa to send a copy of the letter. She agreed. 10 minutes later, the email arrived. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. The letter was dated 29 years earlier. He wrote that Madison would be raised as the Collins family's lawful daughter and that one day Pine Hollow will belong to her. He also wrote that if Teresa returned or made direct contact, he would treat it as harassment and report her to immigration authorities. Madison read to the end, stood, went into the bathroom, and vomited. That evening, the town sheriff came to Pine Hollow. Not because I called him. Miriam contacted him after determining that the forged instrument may have been used in Blake's bank application. A forged signature on a gift deed was serious. Using it to establish assets in a loan file could constitute fraud, involving several people. My father came too. He entered with my mother, his personal attorney, and a newly installed expression of calm. He said he wanted to resolve everything within the family, but Miriam had inflated a misunderstanding. His lawyer suggested I sign a statement declaring that the transfer document had been an unused draft. "I will not sign," I said. My father looked at me. "If you do not sign, this could become a criminal matter. You knew that before you signed my name. I did it for Madison." Madison stood beside the fireplace. "Do not use me." He turned toward her. "I secured your future. You took someone else's future to do it. You do not understand, Teresa. I just spoke with her." His face changed. Only slightly, but enough. My mother stepped forward. "Madison, you do not know what that woman might say to pull you away from us." Madison looked at her. "Did you ever read her letters?" My mother did not answer. "Yes or no?" "A few of them." "And you never gave them to me?" "I was afraid they would hurt you." "I am hurt because you decided I had no right to know." My father turned back to me. "Audrey, you can stop this. You have always been practical. You know what a prosecution would do to your mother, to Madison, to this family's reputation. Once again, I am supposed to keep everything standing. You are capable." I heard Grandma's voice in my mind. "The ability to bear a load is not an obligation to carry every load." "No," I said. "I have a choice." My father's attorney spoke gently. "Miss Collins, we can reach an agreement. Mr. and Mrs. Collins will relinquish any claim to the house. In exchange, you confirm that you do not wish to pursue the matter." Miriam answered before I could. "They never possessed a valid claim to the house. This is an opportunity to avoid unnecessary harm." I looked at my father. Are you going to tell the truth about Madison's adoption papers? The attorney paused. He clearly had not known about that part. My father said, "It is unrelated. It is related if you used a promise about Pine Hollow to pressure Teresa not to return." My mother sat down, her hands trembling. The sheriff asked my father whether he wished to continue answering questions with counsel present. His attorney immediately ended the conversation. Before leaving, my father stood in the doorway and looked at me. "You have the house," he said. "What more do you want?" I considered that question for several seconds. "I want you to stop behaving as though my keeping what belongs to me means I am taking something from you." He did not answer. After they left, my mother remained behind. My father called her name from the porch. She did not turn. The door closed behind him. My mother stood beneath the Christmas tree, smaller than I had ever seen her. "I did not know he forged your signature," she said, "but you knew about the plan to give away the house. He said you agreed, and you did not ask me." She lowered her head. I was afraid of the answer. It was the first truly honest sentence she had spoken to me. "I knew that if I asked, you would say no," she continued. Madison had already told Blake's family. Richard said that if everyone was present, you would not make a scene. I thought you would eventually see that it was good for her. You thought I would absorb it." "Yes, because I always do." She nodded, tears falling. "Yes." I handed her the unsent letter Grandma had written. She read it standing, then lowered herself into a chair. When she finished, she did not deny it. She folded the letter with great care. "She was right," my mother said. "I loved Madison like a vow. I believed that if I loved her enough, your father's betrayal would not define me. And you," she looked at me, "you were like the life before it happened. You remembered how good everything had once been. Every time I looked at you, I remembered how foolish he had made me feel. I did not hate you, but I let you pay because you did not make me feel needed. I had waited years for such a confession, but when it came, it did not heal me immediately. Truth is not a painkiller. It is more like a doctor finally naming the disease correctly. You know you did not imagine it, but your body still hurts." "I am sorry," she said. I looked at her. "For which part?" she faltered. "For sending me away? For not asking before giving away my house? For reading Teresa's letters and hiding them? For helping Dad turn Madison into proof that your marriage remained intact?" Each question made her contract. "I am not saying this to hurt you," I said. "I need you to understand that a general apology cannot cover 30 years like a tablecloth." She nodded. "I will name each thing, but perhaps not tonight." "Right, not tonight." My mother stood and put on her coat. Before leaving, she turned to Madison. "I do not know whether you will still want to call me Mom." After a moment, Madison answered, "I cannot decide that in one day. But I know you are the person who raised me, and I also know you kept me from the person who gave birth to me. Both are true." My mother cried. "I understand." Madison shook her head. "No, you are beginning to." My mother left alone. That Christmas ended without a single gift being opened. Wrapped boxes remained beneath the tree. The turkey went cold. Snow covered the tire tracks in the drive. Near midnight, Madison, Miriam, and I ate apple pie, none of us knowing whether to call the day a disaster or a beginning. 3 days later, when most of the world returned to work, events began to take legal form. Blake's bank confirmed that the forged instrument had been submitted in a preliminary loan file, though the loan had not been approved. My father claimed he believed he had verbal authorization from me. The former notary admitted that he had applied his seal in exchange for $5,000. Miriam filed a report with the trust board and requested an order barring my father from Pine Hollow. I did not decide whether charges would be brought. Part of growing up is understanding that not every consequence is yours to dispense. Once evidence of fraud entered banking and notarial records, the process moved on its own. My father called 17 times during the first week. I did not answer. His messages shifted from anger to argument to self-pity. I was only trying to keep a promise. Your grandmother made everything unfair. Madison needs the house more than you do. Your mother cannot sleep. You are letting outsiders destroy this family. Not once did he say, I had no right to sign your name. Madison remained at Pine Hollow for 6 days, not as an owner, as a guest. She knocked on my bedroom door before entering. She asked before using the car. She left her key on the table every evening. Those small acts did not erase what had happened, but they were the first evidence that she could learn a language other than the one our family had taught us. Blake came on December 28th. He returned the engagement ring to Madison, or rather, they placed it together on the table between them. They did not end the relationship immediately, but they canceled the spring wedding. Blake said he could not marry her until he knew what existed between them beyond asset plans and the image of two families. Madison did not beg. She cried after he left, but she did not blame me. That same day, Teresa sent an overnight package. Inside were copies of letters, an infant bracelet marked Baby Alvarez, and 30 birthday cards she had written to Madison but never sent. One for every year from age 1 through 29. The 14th card read, I hear you like to draw. I used to draw flowers on every scrap of paper I could find. Madison sat on the living room floor and read each one. I sat several feet away revising a design, though in truth I could not read a single line. Do you think I should meet her? She asked. I think you should decide without allowing anyone to tell you that you owe them an answer. She looked at me. Including her? Including her. Madison nodded. I will meet her. Teresa came to Vermont during the first week of January. She did not ask to stay at Pine Hollow. She rented a room at an inn in town and suggested meeting at a public cafe. Madison wanted me to accompany her. Teresa was smaller than she appeared in photographs. She wore a dark blue coat and held her coffee cup tightly with both hands. When Madison entered, Teresa stood but did not rush forward to embrace her. She only said, You have your father's eyebrows and my way of standing when afraid. Madison began to cry. Teresa asked, May I hug you? She nodded. I turned toward the snow outside the window. The meeting did not become a miracle. Teresa was not a perfect mother stolen from a fairy tale. She had lived another life, with a husband, a son, and years of depression. She admitted there were times she had been too frightened to return and fight. Madison admitted that she was angry with Teresa, even though she knew the anger was not entirely fair. They asked small questions, allergies, favorite foods, whether either of them talked in their sleep. The ordinary details made the room ache more than any grand confession. Before leaving, Teresa gave me an envelope. Margaret sent this to you, she said. Inside was an old photograph. I was about 8, standing on Pine Hollow's porch, holding a model house made from craft sticks. On the back, Grandma had written, Audrey has begun building her own refuge. Teresa said Grandma once wrote that I was the reason she protected the house at any cost. Not because she loved me more than Madison, because I was the only child who had already been moved once, and she did not want anyone to remove me from safety again. I held the photograph until the paper edge pressed into my fingers. For the first time, I understood that Grandma's letter was not a challenge to the family. It was an escape plan for me. My father's case continued for almost a year. He did not go to prison, which some relatives called fortunate and others called proof that I had made a huge issue out of nothing. He pleaded guilty to using a fraudulent document, paid a fine, received probation, and lost the right to participate in managing 2 small businesses he had been operating. The notary permanently lost his commission. At Madison's request, her adoption file was reopened, though too many years had passed to prosecute much of what had happened. What mattered most to her was not punishment. It was correcting the record so Teresa's name was properly acknowledged and receiving copies of every document that had been hidden from her. My father never apologized to me. He sent a 12-page letter explaining why he believed he had acted correctly. I read 3 pages and stopped. Some people use explanations as a way to summon you back into a courtroom where they are both defendant and judge. I stored the letter in my safe, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that understanding someone's motives does not require me to remain within their reach. My mother began therapy. I knew because she told me, not because I asked. She sent separate apologies, as I had requested, one for taking me to Pine Hollow and later retelling it as though I had chosen to leave, one for reading Teresa's letters, one for the Christmas dinner. None demanded a reply. I answered the 4th letter with only 3 sentences. We had coffee in June. She did not touch my hand without asking. That gesture was so small that it might have meant nothing to anyone else, but to me it felt like someone knocking before opening a door. Madison moved to Santa Fe for 3 months to be near Teresa and her family. She did not marry Blake. They separated in the spring, without spectacle, and without either becoming a monster. Madison said they had loved the image of a life more than they had loved the uncomfortable parts of one another. She found work at a small gallery, rented a 1-bedroom apartment, and for the first time paid a security deposit without using our parents' name. When she sent me a photograph of the keys, she wrote, "I asked the landlord before taking them." I laughed alone in my kitchen. The following Christmas, snow returned to Pine Hollow. I did not invite the entire extended family. I invited people who knew how to knock. Miriam arrived with 2 bottles of cider. Teresa and her husband flew from New Mexico. Madison came a day early carrying a box of handmade ornaments from the flower shop. My mother arrived alone on the afternoon of December 24th. My father was not invited, and for the first time, no one tried to turn that boundary into a vote. Before dinner, Madison stood beneath the Christmas tree and took a set of keys from her coat pocket. My heart stopped for 1 beat, though reason told me she could not possess new keys. She placed the repaired wooden star tag in my palm. The front still read Pine Hollow. On the back, she had added a small line, "Given is different from taken." "I kept the old wooden tag," she said. "I returned the real keys last year. I thought this should come back to where it belongs." I closed my fingers around it. After dinner, my mother stood beside the fireplace and asked whether she could read something. It was not an announcement. No spoon struck a glass. She simply read a short passage she had written for both of us. A family is not a place where one person is appointed to be the roof so everyone else can avoid the rain. A family is a place where each person is asked what they can give, what they want to keep, and what they need protection from. Her voice trembled. Madison held Teresa's hand. I stood by the tree and watched the lights reflected in the dark windows. I cannot say everything was healed. My father still tells people I chose property over family. A few relatives still believe I should have let Madison have the house because I live alone. There are meals when my mother and I have to stop because an old sentence returns. There are times Madison wants me to move on faster than I can. There are moments when I look at her and remember the keys in her hand that Christmas Eve. But the house still stands. Not because it never cracked, because the cracks were finally seen, named correctly, and reinforced where necessary. I am still an architect. I still believe houses speak. Pine Hollow speaks through the stairs, the wind in the chimney, and the front door each time someone waits outside to be invited in. On the wall of my study, I framed Grandma's letter, not the line declaring that the house belonged to me. I framed the final sentence she added in purple ink along the margin, the sentence Miriam had skipped that first night because her voice had broken. You do not have to keep this house at any cost, Audrey. You only have to remember that no one who truly loves you will ask you to disappear so they can have more room. I read that sentence every winter morning. Pine Hollow is not a trophy I won from my family. It is where I learned that a roof does not become a family simply because people with the same last name walk beneath it. It becomes a family when no one takes a key without permission, no one signs your name for you, and no one raises a glass to give your life away to someone else and calls it love. That Christmas Eve, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped onto the porch alone. Snow settled lightly on the railing. Light from the living room stretched across the white ground in a golden rectangle. I heard Madison laughing in the kitchen, with Teresa and my mother asking Miriam how to prepare the cider. The sounds were imperfect, but they were no longer built upon a lie. I locked the door, not to keep my family outside. I locked it because I finally understood that the right to open a door belongs to the person who lives inside.